I knew the first time I ever visited Galveston that this is where my soul belonged. And that was 30 years ago. Been here for 17 years. Absolutely love it. This is where, like I said, I'm meant to be.
Welcome to Houston Strange. My name is Adam and I will be your host. A few months ago I had the pleasure of sitting down with Keel, who runs Spooky Galveston Ghost Tours. Our interview took place on the third floor of the Hutch and Seeley building, which, throughout the course of our conversation, I learned had been used as a temporary morgue during the Great Storm of 1900, and is subsequently supposed to be haunted by multiple spirits, including the mysterious heroine who saved so many people during the night of that storm. We spoke for so long that day that honestly I might have to post a bonus episode of material that just didn't quite fit in the timeline. We covered everything from the storm, the haunted Walmart, and even some more modern tales, which we'll get to at the end of this episode. But naturally, our conversation moved to the Grand Galvez Hotel. Built in 1911 as a symbol of the strength and tenacity of the people of Galveston, the Galvez casts its gaze out over the Gulf with the hard-earned respect of a sea captain who has weathered many a storm in over a century of service. I had to try and get into this hotel and learn more about it. Thankfully, Jin just happened to know the person who could help me out. Melissa has worked at the Galvez for over 13 years, giving ghost tours and even leading paranormal investigations. In a similar fashion to the unlikeliness of the haunted Walmart, however, the Galvez was home to another strangely situated spirit.
My very first ghostly encounter at the Galvez was in that bathroom. And this was back in 1997. Long before the tours. My drama banquet for high school was actually held at the Galvez. And we went there. I didn't even know very much about the Galvez at this point because I knew about Strand ghost stories and I knew about urban legends about the 1900 storm, but I didn't know that much about the actual hotel. And I went into the restroom because I was feeling sick from dinner, and a gentleman knocked on the stall door and asked me if I was okay. And the ladies who were standing next to the sink freaked out because there was no man in the bathroom with us.
I call him Mr. Stanley. When he worked here, he actually worked here from 1964 to 1976. I have his census records. I have his obituary. He is literally buried in the same cemetery that our late guest ambassador, Mr. Bobby Lee Hilton, who started here at 14, who, by the way, is the one that told me who this gentleman was. He actually showed himself in the very first photo on the very first tour that I ever gave 13 years ago. When I showed him this photo, Mr. Bobby looked at me and he says, "Well, Miss Melissa, I know him." What? I said, "How, Mr. Bobby?" And he said, "He worked here with me." So, and I actually do a lot of tours with mediums, and they will bring me their advanced students. I actually had one that told me, she says, "Melissa, he used to work here." And I said, "Thank you." I said, "He did." And she says, "But when he worked here," she says, "these were not the restrooms. These were executive offices. And this is where he would go to cool off." And I'm like, I know exactly how he feels. In the middle of summer, Melissa goes to the music hall to cool off. I'm telling you, it's the coldest spots in the hotel, is that end of the hotel where our haunted bathrooms and the music hall is. But that is kind of his area. So we have other spirits there as well, but he is just the most well-known one. And like I said, it wasn't the restrooms because people started calling him Tom. For Peeping Tom, because he started showing up, right around in that vicinity. And like I said, when I found out that they weren't the restrooms when he worked here, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. He passed in 84, so at the age of 74. So, and ironically, like I said, him and Mr. Bobby are now buried in the same cemetery. They're both buried in Lakeview here on the island. I've never had any experiences other than all the toilets flushing at one time.
Every time I walk into the bathrooms, the Galvez now, on that side, the toilets all flush at the same time. It's hilarious.
So that happened quite a bit. Not as much since we've had the renovation. And I don't know why that is. So, but like I said, I think there's somebody else in there other than just Mr. Stanley. I've got some other stories that involve, let's just say, this is a kind of one that's kind of a little bit far out there. But supposedly a man was having an affair here at the Galvez with another woman. And the man's wife found out. And let's just say my medium that is telling me this is saying that this woman had some sort of hex put on her husband's mistress. And so I guess when this woman passed, she was banished to our bathrooms. I know it sounds very, very far-fetched, but we have a sales manager here, Angie. She's been with us for over 20 years, sweet as can be.
I have not stepped foot in the restroom down by the music hall in the past 11 years. I will not go back in. It freaked me out so much.
This is Angie. Her role at the Galvez means she has a pretty well-packed schedule, but I always prefer to get first-hand accounts wherever possible. She graciously managed to squeeze in time for a phone call so she could share her experience with me.
Let's see. So I was 8 months pregnant. I just got through with a site tour with one of my clients, and I just wanted to go wash my hands. So I was closest to that ballroom, the music hall ballroom. The restroom was right across the hall. So I just ran in there to wash my hands. And I just had this very strange feeling like someone was watching me. Everything that they say happens, like the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You get the chills. It just felt somebody's here. I'd look, nobody's behind me. And I just thought I need to get out of this restroom. So I opened the door, and this force, I don't know, just something pushed me out of the restroom. And so they had me on camera actually running down the hall because we looked back. So I'm like, this is crazy. I wanted to see if somebody was like in there. So they have me running down the hall. Nothing was on camera, but whenever I got to the end, our concierge was there, and I told her what happened. She said, oh my goodness, you need to go and talk to Debbie in the spa. She said, don't tell her what happened to you, just go and talk to her. So I ran down to the spa and talked to Debbie, and I said, has anything happened to you in this restroom? She said, oh my God, Angie, I went in there the other day and I felt like somebody was standing behind me. She said, this cold rush came through me and I just was like forced out of the bathroom. I said, holy cow. And so I told her it happened to me as well.
This doesn't really sound like Mr. Stanley, the sweet older man who checks in on sickly guests and photobombs innocent selfie takers. Could the story of the scorned lover be true? We only have the medium's word on this one, but it certainly sounds plausible. At least, in terms of ghost stories and urban legends, that is. And what is it about bathrooms that can be inherently spooky? I think we can all agree that we've been in some spooky bathrooms, whether it was the one in the far corner of the school on a dark and rainy day, or in the mall after a late night movie. In your head, you know it's just a regular restroom, but you can't help looking over your shoulder in the mirror while you dry your hands. Is it the sense of liminality, or the thought that someone could easily be hiding in one of the stalls, or even behind your shower curtain? The Japanese have multiple urban legends which involve bathroom ghosts. The most well known, perhaps, being the story of Hanako-san. Depending on where you hear this story, the legend differs, but ultimately it involves a young girl meeting her untimely end in a school bathroom. Today, children dare each other to summon Hanako-san by knocking on the stall door 3 times and asking, "Are you there, Hanako-san?" This is not unlike the more westernized Bloody Mary ritual, which, let's face it, more often than not, takes place in school bathrooms with kids trying to get a good scare out of each other. Again, these things might sound a little bit far-fetched, especially to the skeptic mind, but when push comes to shove, how many of us would be willing to tempt fate to try out these little children's games? I will be uploading the pictures that Melissa was good enough to share with me to the Houston Strange Instagram account because honestly, I was shocked at just how clear some of them were. Especially of Mr. Stanley. Thankfully, Angie hasn't had any more negative encounters, but I asked her what it's like nowadays, working at the hotel.
Actually, just yesterday I had a client, and she said before I even told her the story, she said, I felt so strange in that restroom because she knows the hotel's haunted. And then I told her the story. She's like, oh my gosh. She said, I felt like somebody was there just watching me. Yep. somebody's there. Well, no, something's there. Whenever I'm here on weekends at night, I'll hear just random noises, like someone's in the offices with me and I know I'm there by myself. One of the ladies worked one night. I was off and she said she heard laughing, like kids laughing.
We have tons of little ones in white. That is what I refer to as the little ones from the 1900 storm. But they're not boo-hooing. They're not crying. They're, the spirits that we have here, the little ones especially, they're running around, they're laughing, they're playing, they're giggling. The ballrooms are their playgrounds, the hallways are their runways.
Their spa at the Galvez is haunted, and it's said to be haunted by children. And they have had a psychic medium who went through, who said that she talked to those children and that the children told her that they died at St. Mary's. And then they walked and walked until they found a castle in the sand, decided that's heaven, and that's why they chose to stay there. And I know people who have had interactions with these children who have, had them turn the lights off on them in the bathroom and stuff like that. Galveston has a ton of haunted bathrooms, in case you didn't know. I think a lot of it is the fascination because lights and water were not regular things that everybody had at that time. Though there's definite novelty to that, here in the city.
We have a little one that likes to come in here a lot. And I'm telling you, this little one, he is such a sweet little thing. We had one guest that was staying with us, and she was pretty famous. She was actually here on assignment. So her little boy actually had leukemia at the time. And the next day, she was telling me about a little boy waking her son up. And I told her, I said, well, I'm going to tell you what I think that is. I said, we have this sweet little boy. I said, I think that he must have known that he was a little sick. And I said, I think he was probably just checking on him. And, just looking over, just checking on him, making sure he was okay. And she looked at me and she says, Melissa, she says, I think you're right. She says, he was not afraid at all. She says, in fact, it was more like he was comforted by this. And I said, yeah, I said, that's him. I call him Robert. So, but he has made quite a few appearances on this end, this wing of the hotel, and especially in 501.
A castle in the sand. This really stuck out to me because naturally I had questions as to why the Galvez would be haunted by victims of the 1900 storm when it had been built over a decade after the storm had taken place. I think as humans, we have a need to understand why things happen a certain way. And while the castle in the sand theory might sound a little too good to be true, who am I to try and debunk it? The facts are that people have experienced what appear to be the ghosts of children in old-fashioned nightclothes or children playing harmless pranks on people the way children should. Reports of ghostly children showing up in unexpected places happen a lot more than you would think. One of the most common stories I hear are from elderly patients in nursing homes or people receiving hospice care. Ghostly children are often reported in these types of facilities all over the world, and the people seeing them aren't typically scared either. I do always encourage skeptic thinking, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but out of all the horror that came from the storm of 1900, I think we should accept this bittersweet castle in the sand theory. I'd also like to mention that the little boy who had leukemia made a full recovery and is an avid paranormal enthusiast to this day. But it would appear that once again, I was learning just a little too late that the room I was sitting in was notoriously haunted. I didn't mind all that much, to be honest, but I will continue to blame paranormal activity for the various equipment malfunctions I experienced during these interviews and not user error. I wanted to know more about this room though. Other than a Ouija board on the dresser which seemed a little out of place, the room was cozy. The antique furniture held an almost regal quality, although the room still felt very much modern and elegant with two tall windows giving it a sense of airiness, with gorgeous views both out over the bay and across the island itself. I found it hard to imagine being disturbed in the night by a ghostly presence in conditions such as these.
Well, we are actually in the most famous haunted room at the Grand Galvez. This is room 501. This is home to Audra, our lovelorn bride. She was in her mid-20s. She was engaged to a mariner who would sail in and out of the port of Galveston. 501 is the room that she would stay in while she was waiting on him to return from sea. When it was time for his ship to get back in, she would leave room 501, take the elevator up to the 7th floor, then climb the narrow steps to the west turret. And there, sheltered from the wind, the rain, and the weather, she would keep an eye out for her fiancé's ship. The word got back to her that there was a mighty storm at sea, that the ship went down, and all hands on deck were lost. So in her despair, she took that elevator up that one last time. This time she carried a rope with her, and she ended up hanging herself. Now, the saddest part of the story is her fiancé, very much alive, showed back up to the Grand Galvez just a few short days later, looking for his bride-to-be, who unfortunately is no longer in the land of the living, but now one of our long-term non-paying guests. She is our most well-known, but by no means is she our only spirit here at the Galvez.
As I sat in room 501 listening to Melissa tell these stories, I watched the sun set and the lights from the Pleasure Pier become more prominent against the deepening purple of the night sky. What a perfect setting for such a tragic story of love, loss and despair. Audra supposedly ended her life on April 19th, 1955, according to one local source. Intrepid investigators have scoured the newspaper archives and obituaries from the time, but to no avail. I have also looked into it, but I didn't expect to find much. There is no true source for Audra's story, but does it seem all that far-fetched for a story like this to be kept under wraps so as not to discourage future guests? A hotel as grand as the Galvez has a reputation to uphold after all. Maybe the story of Audra has lived on through word of mouth. Perhaps a piece of tantalising gossip from one neighbour to the next over 70 years ago was the making of a legendary tale today. It's not totally unbelievable that a hotel would try to cover up certain scandals, especially a hotel as old as the Galvez. A hotel that managed to keep its doors open throughout a particularly trying time. The Prohibition era started in 1920 and lasted all the way until 1933. During this time, production, importation, transportation and sale of alcohol was prohibited. Naturally, this led to a huge increase in the illegal production, importation, transportation and sale of alcohol. Some historians blame Prohibition for bolstering the success of organised crime across America. Bootleggers started smuggling booze across borders north and south. Bathtub gin, moonshine and all sorts were being made in secret locations all across the country, and good old-fashioned mobsters like Al Capone, Bugsy Siegel, Lucky Luciano and Enoch Nucky Johnson made their fortunes on black market booze. These names still live on in popular culture through songs, books and film, but they were by no means the only ones hustling hooch.
I did see one ghost one time. You know, I'm going to tell you, when I say that the energy here at the Galvez is good, now there is a place here at the Galvez that the energy is completely different. I don't want to say that it's hostile, but it's very, very tense. It's very heavy up there, very heavy. And that's on the 7th and 8th floor. I don't know if you've ever heard of the mob family of Galveston, the Maceo family. So Sam and his brother Rosario, they called him Papa Rose. You know, they actually immigrated from Italy through Louisiana and ended up here in Galveston. So here in Galveston, they joined the beach gang, you know, kind of got, you know, along well with them. And in the meantime, they ended up working in our barber shop, which is in the same spot that our beauty salon is today. So let's just say they ended up in our penthouse suite. We found a secret room up there. We found where they were hiding the liquor. So it's like a 10 by 15 room. It's right next to the turrets. You know, not that they were doing it, but one of their cronies or whatever, you know, all they'd have to do is just walk out, get the liquor, lower it down one of the cooling towers, and somebody else would get it and go away with it. So, but like I said, the energy up there is completely different than the rest of the Galvez. Kind of high strung, if that makes sense. Women, you could tell that they really don't care for women. A lot of time women will start getting nauseated, headaches. A lot of times I'll just say, just step out of the hallway that we're in or the area that we're in. But I was taking my tour up there. There was a boardroom, and you have to exit the elevator to get to the boardroom. And we're walking across, and there was a pool table right there, and then we had bar stools around the edges by the window. And as soon as my tour got past where we could see, I looked over, and I'm like, I think I just saw something. It was a mobster. He was sitting there, double-breasted suit, big shoulder pads, sitting there. He wasn't even sitting on the bar stool. He had his bottom kind of propped up on it with his foot up on the peg. And I said, "Oh, I think I just saw something." Everybody else said, "We did too." And as soon as I said that, he kind of leaned up and he just slowly walked right through a slanted door leading to a wet bar to the room, the meeting hall, or space that we were going into. So we walked in, he wasn't there. He must have kept on going. He was gone. So, but like I said, the energy up there is completely different. You could definitely tell the difference. I'm telling you, I've left from up there and had the most intense headaches. I have some strange photos from up there. You know, like I said, it's different than any other place in the hotel. I think you can tell by the look on my face because I could feel it right now. I'm not smiling. I'm not all bubbly. It is definitely different than the rest of the hotel. And they're renovating that right now.
Renovations taking place is often said to increase paranormal activity. Some people even report living in a peaceful home for years, only to have a sudden outburst of paranormal activity after renovations begin. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the spirits of the Maceo family really are roaming their old headquarters up on the 7th floor. If the crew at the Galvez have already uncovered one hidden room, I can only imagine this is the very reason why tensions may feel a little high up there. Are there more secrets hidden up there that these gangsters don't want exposed? Or am I just getting carried away with the story here? Maybe. But this could be the very reason why Melissa and multiple tour goers saw what they believed to be one of these mobsters that evening. I'm regretting not going up to the 7th and 8th floor now, to be honest, but I think it'll be a great excuse for me to go back down and visit Melissa for one of her tours, so expect an update episode on this later. I'd love to hear some opinions on these stories, particularly going back to the castle in the sand theory from earlier, because the hotel seems almost like a haven for spirits from all different backgrounds and eras. Nuns, cowboys, past co-workers, victims of the Great Storm, mobsters, and Melissa even told me of a Native American spirit in full traditional regalia who shows up occasionally. Why do you think this hotel is so active with such an array of different spirits? Or is every hotel like this? Before I left that evening, Melissa told me of another couple of run-ins with what she refers to as their long-term non-paying guests.
I came across a little old man one time, and I'll tell you, this is the most detail that has ever registered at one time. And I was bebopping through the kitchen here at work, and I happened just to glance over to my right, and I was looking to see what manager was working. And I saw this little bitty old man, and I'm telling you, everything registered just bam, instantaneously. And I'm talking the weathered skin. I mean, it was so wrinkled. I can still remember. I mean, it was almost as dark as this mahogany on this radio. And it was so, you could tell he spent a lifetime outside. His pants, I don't know, this is crazy. His pants looked like Carhartt jeans. They were made out of the Carhartt material. And I'm sorry, they look like skinny jeans. And in my mind, I said 3 times, why is he wearing skinny jeans? I'm serious, 3 times, Adam, in my mind, I said, why is he wearing skinny jeans? I could see the texture of his long sleeve shirt. And the last thing that I saw was his hat. Then it was made out of woven palm fronds, and it was still green in spots. But as soon as, I'm still making that corner, going around the corner, then everything registered. And then I whip back around, and then he has his hands together, and he's just backing back into the wall. He saw me. He knew that I saw him, but he just backed up. So, but that was pretty cool. Like I said, I mean, just the way everything registered at once. That was pretty amazing. My latest experience, and I have to tell you this was so funny because when I started here 13 years ago, there was this one spot downstairs, hub of activity. It's right there by the break room, the associate elevator. So it's always busy. And there's this one long hall that leads to our banquet and our housekeeping storage area. From the first time I walked in, I said, I'm going to see a ghost there. And you know what? I probably looked there every day, every time I walked by, every time I stood by that elevator, every day for, oh, Lord knows how long. I know it's been or it was over 7 years. And I finally, I guess, just one day I stopped looking. Well, at the end of October this past year, I was sitting down there and it was Lone Star Rally. So the outside of the hotel was so busy, inside, not a soul. And I'm telling you, what is usually such a busy hub of activity was nothing. It was dead quiet. And I hit the elevator button. I kind of lean up against it and I looked down the hallway long enough to see, and I'm going to say this little boy, he was probably between 10 and 12, a young man probably, but I could see that he was wearing the blue like knee shorts, white socks, a long sleeve white knit shirt. I could see the color of his flesh. I could see that he had blonde hair. And this little boy kind of took like a leap across the area where it was open. And the only thing that was so different about that, it was so strange because as he went across, it was like you could see chasers. You know, like where the white was from his shirt, it was white all the way across. But I don't know if it just the motion was so fast or what. That was a very interesting experience for me. And I'm like, finally, finally, I see it. I feel like I said, most of the spirits that we have here choose to be here. They were wandering the island, you know, who knows what they were doing. But, you know, and you came upon, you know, the Grand Galvez, my gosh, they're in their heyday now. You know, look at the parties. We had a huge wedding last night. I guarantee you the spirits that were in that ballroom, they were having as much fun as the live guest. And that's the way I feel about doing the tours here. I mean, these stories that I've learned over the years, I mean, I'm not telling them for me. They deserve to have their stories told. And I feel like that's the reason why that I'm getting to know these spirits. And like I said, that's because I could share their story. And it's, you know, there's so many beautiful stories here at the Galvez. I wish I could share them all.
I wonder how many of us would be this excited to see a potential ghost in our workplace. It's interesting to me too that specific area of the hallway almost called out to Melissa for all those years, even though she had never witnessed anything. Was the energy of this young boy always there and she just couldn't see it? Did it wait for the place to empty out to finally reveal itself? Or was it just sheer luck or coincidence? Right place, right time. Things like this always make me reflect on my own experiences. Even the silly little ones from when I was a child, which I'm sure we've all had. For me, it was the staircase in my grandparents' house. The stairs wrapped around the corner before reaching the bottom, so at night we were always left with a view into a black chasm of terror, beyond which lay a vast unknown, which held the ever-changing mystery location of the house's one bathroom. Of course, that wasn't exactly true, but the mind runs wild when the lights go out. Imagine if after all these years you finally saw something in that place that always seems to catch your attention, that proved your fears to be true. The stairs down into the cellar, the attic hatch on the landing, that closet in your childhood bedroom. Clearly, this is not how Melissa or Jin feel about these things. I think these experiences that they've shared just further prove that their real passion is to share these people's stories and to celebrate their apparent continued existence in a place that was once their home, even if the layout is a little bit different than before. Melissa also shared Jin's opinion on the fact that the spirits that remain here on Galveston Island still seem to be enjoying themselves and living that party island lifestyle. On an island that's so full of life, full of tourists taking leisurely strolls along the seawall, people enjoying the many bar and restaurant patios at all hours of the day and night, it seems like a ghost in full Victorian garb might stand out a little. Except for when the Dickensian weekend is taking place, of course. But what if some of the beachgoers that you walk past are not who you think they are? Right before we wrapped up for the day, Jin told me one last story that genuinely made my skin crawl.
So a good friend and I, her name is Ellie, and she and I were just talking about this last night, as a matter of fact. This is really funny. We, after ghost tours, because she was a ghost tour guide just like me, we worked for the same company before I owned it. And she She and I had gone down to the beach after our tours, like we did every night after tours, just to kick our feet in the water and just talk, catch up. And when you have a bestie, that happens. Well, we went down to the beach, not to our usual spot. We actually were further down the beach than where we would normally go. And we kept getting signs that we should leave. The air got very still. The water got very quiet. At one point, she had her hair up in a ponytail, and I saw like her hair was being pulled. And she was like freaking out because somebody was grabbing her hair and like dragging her off. And when that episode ended, I'm like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "Yeah." And she's like, that was really weird. I'm like, "It was really creepy. I saw your hair was being pulled." And I said, "Do you want to leave?" And she said, "Well, do you want to leave?" And I'm like, "Nah, ghosts." She's like, "Nah, ghosts." And we just continue with our conversation. We were waiting for the first cold front of the season to blow in. That's what we were there for. And we got back to talking, and, then the wind and the water got still and quiet again. And at that point, we both looked at each other and go, "We need to leave." So we went up topside. We were sitting on one of the benches on the seawall, and we were kicking the sand off of our feet to get back into our cars. And we're talking, and like besties do, we got lost in conversation again. And all of a sudden, she says, "Jen, I don't want to alarm you, but there is an exceptionally creepy man standing across the street. And I think on the count of 3, we need to stand up and get in our cars." Which was fine, except for we were diagonally sitting across from each other's cars. So I'm here, my truck's here, she's here, her car's here. And so on the count of 3, we stand up and we start towards our cars. Creepy man was over here closer to where my truck was. And as I run towards my truck, he runs towards me. I managed to get into my truck, shut the door, lock it, put the key in the ignition and turn it over. The headlights come on. My headlights blind her in her rearview mirror so she can't see what's going on. And creepy man disappears. And I grew up in Houston, and I'm not really scared of anything. I carry a crowbar just for these type of occasions. So I hopped out with my crowbar thinking this fool had crouched down either in front of my truck or rolled underneath it. Maybe ducked around the back. Wasn't sure. I lost sight of where he went. Nobody was there. And he wasn't running down the beach either, because I checked. And he wasn't there. Guy was just gone. Just poofed out of nowhere. He was gone. Well, we left. We were thoroughly creeped out, and we leave. And she's in her car. I'm in my truck. We're talking on the phone about, getting back to my house because we're freaking out. And the next day we come back because we have ghost tours to do. And we do our ghost tours. We go to the IHOP, and we are sitting there talking with the security guard from the San Luis Hotel because they monitor the whole complex. And he's telling us that he's had a lot of ladies complain about a man who seems to run at them. And they've all been able to escape him, but if they could find him, they would trespass him. Well, we pay our bill, we go outside, we continue our conversation, we're talking about how creepy this is, and Ellie says to him, "So if you could find him, you would trespass him?" He says, "Absolutely." And she looks at me and I look at her, and we looked across the street, and the same guy with sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, white tank top, same khaki shorts and flip-flops he had on the night before is walking down the sidewalk, down the side of the San Luis Hotel towards the seawall. And we looked at him and said, "He's over there. You gonna go take care of it?" And there were other girls that were with us that all saw this person, and that security guard couldn't see him. We believe he might have been one of the addicts that overdosed behind the hotel several years back. But yes, he was dressed as a modern day person, and he looked real. It was even creepier because we saw him 2 nights in a row. Only women could see him. The male security guard, he was looking. He was like, "You're pulling my leg, there's nobody over there."
I will definitely be returning to Galveston for more episodes in the future, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we hear from Jin or Melissa. In the meantime, I am planning to go back down to take one or more of their tours while my mom is visiting at Halloween. But if you would also like to check it out for yourself, you can find Melissa at Ghostess of Galveston and Jin at Spooky Galveston on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll leave all the links below in the show notes. Again, I would like to say a big thank you to Jin and Melissa for their time and patience, and also Angie for taking my call. If you enjoyed this episode or this series, please like, subscribe, rate, review on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And if you or anyone you know has a story that they would like to share, please reach out to me at Houston Strange on Instagram or go to houstonstrange.com for all of the links. Also, if there is a particular person or place that you know of that you'd like me to check out, feel free to drop a suggestion below or just DM me. Thank you as always for listening. Houston Strange is a purely selfish experiment in which I do all of the interviews, music and editing, but you tell the stories. So don't forget to reach out with yours soon. And stay strange, Houston.